All right, 1 Corinthians chapter 10.
For I do not want you to be unaware, brothers, that our fathers were all under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ. Nevertheless, with most of them God was not pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. Now these things took place as examples for us, that we might not desire evil as they did. Do not be idolaters, as some of them were, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. We must not indulge in sexual immorality, as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in a single day. We must not put Christ to the test, as some of them did, and were destroyed by serpents, nor grumble, as some of them did, and were destroyed by the destroyer. Now these things happened to them as an example, but they were written down for our instruction, on whom the end of the ages has come. Therefore let anyone who thinks that he stands take heed lest he fall. No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability, but with the temptation he will also provide the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it. Therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. I speak as to sensible people. Judge for yourselves what I say. The cup of blessing that we bless, is it not a participation in the blood of Christ? The bread that we break, is it not a participation in the body of Christ? Because there is one bread, we who are many are one body, for we all partake of the one bread. Consider the people of Israel. Are not those who eat the sacrifices participants in the altar? What do I imply then? That food offered to idols is anything, or that an idol is anything? No, I imply that what pagans sacrifice they offer to demons, and not to God. I do not want you to be participants with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the table of the Lord and the table of demons. Shall we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than he? All things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Let no one seek his own good, but the good of his neighbor. Eat whatever is sold in the meat market without raising any question on the ground of conscience. For the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. If one of the unbelievers invites you to dinner and you are disposed to go, eat whatever is set before you without raising any question on the ground of conscience. But if someone says to you, "This has been offered in sacrifice," then do not eat it, for the sake of the one who informed you, and for the sake of conscience. I do not mean your conscience, but his. For why should my liberty be determined by someone else's conscience? If I partake with thankfulness, why am I denounced because of that for which I give thanks? So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. Give no offense to Jews or to Greeks or to the church of God, just as I try to please everyone in everything I do, not seeking my own advantage, but they of many, that they may be saved. Be imitators of me as I am of Christ.
Okay, thank you. What was it 2 weeks ago that we talked about?
The weaker brother.
Yeah, the weaker brother, in terms of what?
The strong brother's responsibility to not cause the weaker brother to stumble.
Right. But the specific issue that he was talking about is what? Yeah, to eat things that may have been sacrificed to idols, right? Remember that the whole thing was that there are people who believe, well, you can eat things that were sacrificed to idols, it's not a big deal. And Paul's saying, yeah, you're right. It isn't a big deal. You're free to do that. But it's very clear from this passage, and even something he says last time, that there are people who actually go into the temple and eat as part of the celebration to whatever deity it is, and they think that they are so strong, it's not a big deal, because they worship the real God, so it's fine. They can go into that temple with their unbelieving friends, and they can eat and participate in that celebration and eat that meat while it's actually being sacrificed to the God as a part of the worship service. Paul here is going to argue, absolutely not. That's where you've taken your liberty way too far. You've stepped over a line. You're actually participating in idolatry by doing that. So you're not free to do that. You're free to actually eat the meat if it's in the marketplace. If it's being sold, it's like you don't have to worry like, oh no, this could have been sacrificed to a different god or something. It's fine because it's just meat. You're free to eat of it. Now, of course, with the caveat of being responsible for the believer who can't disassociate that, and you don't want to pressure him into eating it. But this is actually dealing with the person who, in fact, thinks it's okay to go into the temple to actually participate in that. And that's why you have throughout the New Testament that these people eat things sacrificed to idols. It's talking about the wicked. It's talking about the false teachers. It's not talking about things sacrificed to idols that are now in the marketplace. It's actually talking, that's a synecdoche that means they're going to the actual temples and participating in the worship service itself. And that is actually what's wicked and should not be done. So he starts out by saying, "For I don't want you to be unaware, brothers, that our fathers were all under the cloud." So our ancestors, he's talking about in the wilderness journey, they were all under the cloud, all passed through the sea, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud, in the sea, and all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ. So what is he alluding to? What is he actually saying of the people in the wilderness journey in terms of sacraments? They partook in both baptism and communion. So they had the visible signs of the covenant community. They were around these things. They partook in them themselves. Was that where their assurance was? No, because what happened to them? Yeah, nevertheless, with most of them, God was not pleased for, I don't know how your translation takes it, but it's the word to lay low, meaning that he actually struck them dead in the wilderness. He killed them. Do you remember what happened in the wilderness journey? He actually kills the Israelites, like in mass numbers, numerous times for different sins. And he goes over them a little bit in this passage. Talks about how they partook in idolatry, and he quotes in the Exodus when they made the golden calf, the people sat down to eat and drink, and they rose up to frolic, that sort of thing. That's actually talking about the golden calf incident. And then he talks about how the people partook in sexual immorality, and that's with the Midianite women, and tons were struck dead from that. And then he talks about how people complained about basically the food and the situation and all that, and they complained or whatever, and so God sent the serpents in and killed a bunch of them. And then he mentions them grumbling. The grumbling actually refers to numbers like 14 through 16, where the people are grumbling against the authorities that God has placed over them. Well, we don't like these people. We don't like Moses and Aaron. They've kind of led us into a bad situation, and the people are good enough, and da-da-da. And that's where you get like Korah's rebellion. But he kills a bunch of them there as well. And it's fascinating that Paul's mentioning these things, and he's saying, by the way, all this stuff happened for us. These are actually examples for us. It's not just, those Old Testament people, and God was just really mad back then. His point of bringing them up is, these are pictures for you, that you would know that if you participate in these things, God's going to kill you too. You're not a Christian because you partake of the sacraments. You're not a Christian because you saw miraculous things happen. You're not a Christian if you go back over Corinthians and what they think spiritual maturity is, simply because you think you understand grace really well. You're not a Christian because you have knowledge and wisdom and you've been given the word of God and all of that. Whoopee for you. If you're going to partake and participate in sin, then you're going to be damned like the rest. In fact, your judgment will be worse than the rest. It is of no benefit for you to be around holy things if you are in sin and going to participate willfully in sin. In fact, it's way, way worse. Because if I'm in Assyria and I'm committing idolatry and sexual immorality and complaining about God, I'm actually far better off than if I'm in the Holy of Holies doing it. And yet, somehow we think well, I'm a Christian, so I've got a pass. I'm in good with God. So I'm in the Holy of Holies, and I've got Jesus, and so I'm perfectly fine. I can actually indulge in sin, and we've misunderstood the holiness of God. This is why people misunderstand the grace of God, right? Why did the grace of God appear according to Titus, the book of Titus, or Paul in Titus? Why did the grace of God appear? So that we can indulge in whatever we want? Yeah. To make an end of it, to teach us to actually abstain from that which is wicked, and to make us godly and holy and all of that. That's why Ephesians starts out like, by grace you're saved, that not of yourselves, but then it continues on, for you were created in Christ Jesus for the purpose of good works. And then he continues on, and here's how you participate in it. You participate in the church, and you love one another, and the person who steals doesn't steal anymore. Instead, you work with your hands, and you become this different person. You put on the Lord Jesus Christ, and the new man becomes conformed to the image of its creator. That's why you're saved. They've been saved from Egypt, not so they can become Egyptians in the wilderness. They were saved so that they can become Israelites, the people of God. That's why you're saved. And so Paul is trying to convey to the Corinthians, you're not spiritual people because you have spiritual things around you. You're not spiritual people because you go to church and you see the elements there. That doesn't make you a Christian. It doesn't make you in with God. In fact, you may have the wrath of God poured out on you if you're going to continue on in sin. Now, his point in saying this is to say, look, this is why it's not okay for you to participate in going into temples thinking that you're strong. And don't worry, I can handle it. Don't worry, that those sex scenes and nudity and Game of Thrones don't affect me because I'm a Christian, I'm strong. That's why Paul, this is a sarcastic comment at the end. It's like, are you stronger than God? Because God doesn't give you the power if you're going to sin. So you don't have God's power at that point. You're on your own. And what did he do to the people who indulged in those things in the wilderness? He killed them. He destroyed them. So you're actually not too strong. You're not so strong that you're going to be able to, oh, I'm good enough. It's okay. I'm going to go to the club with my friends. And you know what? I'm not going to get drunk. And I'm not going to go home with those girls. And I'm not going to go home with those guys. Because I'm just so strong. You're not strong enough. And God says, if you even do that, you're already in sin. It's not even a matter of, well, I'm putting myself in temptation. No, you're not putting yourself in temptation. You're putting yourself in sin. You're already in the temple. You're already participating in the things of the world. And it's not just about idolatry, which is why Paul doesn't just say, hey, some of them were idolaters and we're not to be idolaters. He then goes on, some of them were sexually immoral and we're not to be sexually immoral. And some of them were grumblers and we're not to be grumblers. And some of them were complainers and we're not to complain. Meaning we're not to participate with the world in anything that they're doing in terms of their sin. Yet everyone thinks, well, I'm a Christian, I can handle it, I can go to the bar with the boys and I won't get drunk. And what happens 9 times out of 10? Well, the Christian ends up getting drunk. 9 times out of 10, that good Christian girl goes home with her boyfriend or goes home with the guy who she met at the club. 9 times out of 10, you hang out with people that are gossiping and complaining and they're negative about everything. Guess what you're going to become? Oh, it's fine that I tell my girlfriends all my problems with my marriage, and you don't think that they're going to give you that mindset to where you walk back into your marriage that way and destroy your marriage? No, you're not strong enough. You're entering into sin when you enter into those situations. It's not a matter of just putting yourself into temptation. You are actually putting yourself in sin by entering into those things.
Is it fair to phrase Paul's point as sacramental participation is not enough to save you? Hence his Israelites,
Mhm.
but it is enough to damn you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think.
Well, we're like, well, if participation in the demonic sacrament can damn me, well then of course all I have to do is just take communion, and that'll save me, right?
Right.
And if the participation in the communion doesn't save me, well then I can go participate in the demonic sacrament and not be damned. But there's actually
Right.
a difference.
Well, and I think here's the real big punch that we didn't really talk about, which is he says down here. Let me actually read the verse, because I think if this does not convict you, I don't know what will. Verse 20. Or verse 19, I'll start at. What do I imply then? That food offered to idols is anything, or that an idol is anything? No. I'm implying that what pagans sacrifice, they offer to demons and not to God. I do not want you to participate with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the table of the Lord and the table of demons. You cannot do both. You cannot participate in the idolatry of the world and be a Christian serving the Lord. You cannot partake in sexual immorality and be a Christian serving the Lord. You cannot partake in the world's grumbling against God. You cannot be a part of it and be a part of the church of God. That is very important. I think that we've been convinced by a lot of antinomian teaching in the church that we can go ahead and do both. And Paul's saying, no, you can't. And so the Israelites who tried to try it in the wilderness, God had to treat them as he treated the world in his midst, which is to destroy it, the wicked world. Why? Because they became something of demons in the wilderness, not of him anymore. They weren't partly of demons and partly of God. They were just of demons. They were just of chaos. And the creator of the universe then destroys chaos, and so he destroyed them in the wilderness. You cannot participate in both. And so you need to make a decision whether or not you're going to participate in both. Because it's either Christ or it's the world. It's either Christ or it's the club. It's either Christ or it's the girlfriend or the boyfriend or whatever. It's either Christ or porn. It's either Christ or getting drunk. But it's never both. There's a great verse in the whole scene with Elijah when he's talking to the Israelites about worshiping Baal, and they think they can worship Baal and they can worship Yahweh. And the verse isn't translated very well. It's translated by some people like how often will you try to choose between two opinions or something, which is not what the Hebrew says. The Hebrew actually says, how long will you try to hobble on two crutches? Meaning, you're trying to worship Yahweh and Baal. But God's very clear. He will not allow that. God's the only God, or he's not your God at all. And it's the same thing here. Paul wants to relate to the Corinthians, look, you can no longer do this. Either follow Christ or don't. But stop saying to yourself, it's okay, I can do both. Because the Lord won't allow it. He says this back in the Gospels too when it comes to money, right? You can worship God or money, not both. God's not sharing a throne with something else. Certainly not going to share it with demons. And what he says here is that this participation in these things, what the Israelites were actually doing is they were worshiping demons. It wasn't just, I'm just complaining because I'm having a bad attitude today. No, actually, you're worshiping a demon today. It wasn't just, I'm grumbling against the authorities God put over me. It's like, no, you're actually participating with demons right now. It's not just, I'm participating in sexual immorality in some way. No, you're actually worshiping demons. And of course, it gets back to idolatry. Same thing with idolatry then. You're not just going to the temples with these guys. You're not just having a sit down and eating meat. You literally are worshiping demons, whether you think that way in your head or not. By participating in what the world is participating in, by participating in their sin, you are worshiping the demons they're worshiping. You know, I know Christians who would be like, well, yeah, I'm going to go to a homosexual marriage because, you know, I just want them to know that I love them and all that sort of thing. It's like, no, you're participating in what they're doing there. You now have become guilty with them. If God were to rain fire on that wedding party, you'd be a part of it. You're not going to go unscathed. And so this is the backdrop of him basically saying then, some things are not okay. You're not free to do everything. And so he quotes again, notice the same thing when he was talking about sexual morality in chapter 6. He quotes what the Corinthians are saying again. All things are lawful for me. That's what it's clear. Most scholars, in fact, I don't know any scholar that doesn't agree, believe this is a quote from the Corinthians that they are saying to themselves. All things are lawful for me. We're saved by grace. I can do whatever I want. And Paul's all, well, technically, if you're really saved, that might be true. All things are lawful for you. But not all things are actually beneficial in terms of being spiritual, in terms of being loving. Not all things build up. Not all things actually sanctify you. Not all things worship God. And therefore, avoid the things that don't sanctify, that don't build up, that are not beneficial, that don't worship God. Because in fact, you'll be participating with demons if you don't. Any comments or questions on that part of it? We'll go into the next section if not, but...
Just one thing, Bryan.
Yeah.
Later in 1 Corinthians 15:33, I think he really captures it. He says, do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good morals.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's about as succinct as you can be.
Yeah, it is amazing that, and look, we all know the Christians that go out with their unbelieving friends and they think they're so strong and it's not going to be a big deal and they do whatever their unbelieving friend, they go to that party and everybody's getting drunk and having sex, but they're not going to be affected, right? And of course, they absolutely are. And some of them may come back, but most of them end up as apostates. Because you cannot do that. And they think, well, I was a Christian at one time. Dude, you were never a Christian. You were always worshiping demons. You just took the label of Christian on you. Christ, you weren't worshiping Christ when you were doing all that stuff. Now, hopefully some of them will be brought back, but man, I wouldn't risk it.
What is the battle plan for sin? He's clear both in 1 Corinthians 6 and here. Run away.
Right.
Flee. It's
Yep.
not stand and fight.
Right.
But there are other places that he says stand and fight, and those are in places where it's unavoidable, you're in the world that exists.
Yeah.
But flee from sexual immorality and flee from idolatry.
Right.
You're not strong enough to fight it, so get away.
Yeah. And just to be clear, those are the two elements in the New Testament that represent all theology and ethics. So if you look in Acts 15, for instance, hey, you guys, you don't have to be circumcised, but just remember, make sure you're worshiping the actual God through the gospel and don't participate in sexual morality. That's the necessary thing. You must do that if you're going to be a Christian. So abstain from eating things sacrificed to idols, which is summarized as, and to abstain from sexual immorality. They represent, don't participate in the religion of the world in any way, and don't participate in the wicked practices of the world in any way. And that's why it's not just flee sexual immorality, it's flee sexual immorality and every other ethical sin that basically the world is indulging in. Don't be around your friends if they're indulging in sin. Your unbelieving friends. By the way, I've said this to my kids. I think I've said to you guys before. Don't have unbelieving friends. Have unbelieving acquaintances. For the purpose of saving them, But your friends, the people that you confide in, the people you want to hang around and enjoy their company, have those as believers. Because if you have unbelieving friends, you want to enjoy their company, guess what your unbelieving friends want to do? They want to go do this stuff. So don't have unbelieving friends. Have unbelieving acquaintances. Be kind, be nice, seek to save them. But ultimately, confide in and enjoy the presence of other Christians.
So, Bryan,
Yeah.
so what do you do with unbelieving family members?
I would treat your unbelieving family members in the way that you do an unbelieving acquaintance. So what I would say, be kind, seek to save them. I would not seek to have them as the primary people that I want to hang around on the day-to-day. Because again, they want to do the same things that, they want to go drinking. They want to, they want to talk about things that are going to tear your mind away from Christ constantly and into the pit. And so, yeah, I would treat them that way. Obviously, if you're talking about parents, you have to honor your parents, and so there's even more honor there than you would give just a regular, sibling or something. But yeah, I would not make them your primary people. I would not make them your go-to with your problems. I think that, especially if you're talking about marital advice, do not go to your unbelieving family members for marital advice. That is awful. They're going to ruin your marriage. Again, don't partake in that. They're going to complain. They're going to grumble. They're going to destroy what's good.
One of my talking points when I talk to people about why not to put their kids in public schools would be to say, because Jesus said that the student will be like his teacher. And everyone always says, well, this one isn't that bad, these teachers aren't that bad. I'm kind of the exception. My kids are the exception to that.
Yeah.
That really doesn't apply to me. I turned out okay,
Right.
And so these
Who's going to witness to all the unbelieving kids? It's like
bad,
yeah, well, all your bad kids are going to witness to your kid, actually. That's the way it actually happens.
and so I think that one of the things I've realized is that, bad company will corrupt good morals.
Right.
That's going to happen. A student will be like his teacher, right? And we tend to think that, well, I didn't go off the deep end and grew up to be my teacher, and that my kid's married to their lesbian partner and voting for Joe Biden or whatever. But I didn't go that far, right? I didn't go all the way, right? I didn't I didn't do any cocaine and didn't have real sex at the party, right?
Yeah.
You are going to be affected.
It
might not be in the extreme, but you can't help but.
Yeah, this is actually the problem with American Christians right now. Oh, well, I don't believe all that transgender stuff, so I'm good. It's yeah, but what's your teleology of sexuality? I guarantee it's the same as sexual revolution in the 1960s. I guarantee it.
Right,
and that's not a Christian worldview.
Right.
So yeah, you're more conservative than the super far left guy. That's great, but this has affected you in thinking that you're okay in your views when you're not.
Yeah.
You don't have Christian worldviews on anything.
But we think I have all these unregenerate friends. I have all these unregenerate teachers, and because I'm slightly to the right, conservative, like all of them, I haven't been affected.
That is the problem with evangelicalism right now. It really is. It's no one's gonna. And then when you try to rebuke an evangelical for anything, it's no one's gonna tell me that. I'm a solid Christian, and it's well, yeah, you think that because again, you're not you don't go to the church with the lesbian pastor or whatever. But it's but that's almost the devil's decoy. So you don't pay attention to what's wrong with your own thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we've all been affected, no doubt. And look, those of us who went to public school, we were all affected by it. We'd be crazy to suggest that we weren't. I know I was majorly, and I had tons of Christianity and Bible being poured into me, and there's still compromise. And again, can you compromise? Can you actually worship Jesus and those things? Are we really just, we're backsliding? Or is it really that we're just in the house of demons and we've fooled ourselves into thinking that we have Jesus too? Okay, so now he's going to go into where he started in terms of how this particular thing of indulging in the sacrifices, eating the meat, like actually in the temple, affects people's consciences, which he mentioned before as well. So before, he talked about how, look, if you have a brother who sees you in the temple, is that not going to ruin his faith? Is that going to destroy him, thinking that it's okay to do that? Because he's going to then think, oh, maybe it's okay for me to go into the temple, even though I feel like I shouldn't, it's okay. And so you're going to get him to sin in that way. But then he talks about even unbelievers. And he says, unbelievers do actually know what Christians believe sometimes. They actually do know that, like, you're preaching a different God to them. And if you're in an unbeliever's house and he's saying, hey, you know what, that this meat was that sacrifice to an idol that we're about to eat, Paul says what? Go ahead and eat it? Yeah, not for the sake of yours. Because you might know it's just meat. Who cares? You're free to eat it. But now he has not disassociated the meat from the worship of his false gods. So now when you eat it, he's going to think you're worshiping his false gods. And Christians, therefore, can go ahead and participate in the demonic. So for his conscience sake, because you're trying to save him, because you're trying to witness to him, don't participate in the wickedness that he's participating in. So not only will you be affected because you're worshiping demons, Paul's actually saying, you know what? Your witness to the other person is destroyed. You're not saving anyone. So now, why are you hanging around those people at all at this point? Because if you go out and you're going to be drinking with them and they associate this drinking with partying and getting drunk and all of that, even if you're not getting drunk. Oh, I thought you were a good Christian. And what I hear from every evangelical is like, well, I just want to show them that good Christians can drink alcohol and it's great and everything. It's like, that's not what you're showing them, because they don't disassociate drinking alcohol with getting drunk. You may do that, and that's fine. You're free to actually drink. That's fine. But they don't disassociate it, so now you're ruining your testimony because of their conscience, not because of yours.
What you save them with, you save them too. So then if they ever do become saved, then they're going to be saved into a religion of syncretism.
Yeah.
Because they think that Christianity is a syncretistic religion.
And you can get drunk as a Christian. You can go to the club and you can just attract all those boys and those miniskirts as a Christian. Because, that's what you did when you basically, were out witnessing to your friends. I know I always bring up the club and you guys are like, we don't go to clubs, but you know what I mean. There are lots of Christians who go to clubs. There are lots of Christian women who go to clubs. That's how they get their fill of the attention and whatnot. Or now I guess the club has become TikTok or, whatever. However women get attention these days. You see what he's getting at. He's saying there's more than just you actively doing a sin. There's more to it than that. If you're actually participating and in the place and among the crowd that's actually sinning, even though you may not be, but you're participating in something they associate with their sin, you're wrecking them. And what's the purpose of being there? Paul says, the purpose of me being there is I'm trying to save them. And so this is in contrast to last time. Last time it was, look, to the Jew I became a Jew. To the Greek I became a Greek. So if the Jews are all eating kosher, I'm eating kosher. So I'm doing whatever they're doing. He's talking again about created things. I'm conforming myself to what they do in terms of their amoral practices. So if they're all wearing tuxedos, I'm going to wear a tuxedo. If they're all wearing t-shirts, I'm going to wear a t-shirt. But now it's the flip side. But if they're participating in sin, I'm not going to be doing that with them. I'm not participating in that. If they're eating meat sacrificed to idols and they let me know that, I'm not going to be eating that meat. Even though I'm free to eat the meat, it's not a big deal. But I'm trying to save them because my focus is not on me, it's on the other person. Because spiritual maturity is about what? Love. The love of the other person over what you're allowed to do. The love of the other person over your freedoms. And so I will conform myself to that other person in so much as I can do so in an amoral way to save them. And I will also abstain from whatever sin they're partaking in or things associated with it so that I don't ruin their conscience and ruin my testimony to them because, again, I'm trying to save them. My focus is on the other person, not on myself. Can you guys think of anything else in our culture, any other situation where this might occur that we need to be careful of? I mean, I mentioned a couple, but...
Is it specifics of...
Well, just like, I mentioned, like, you know, going to parties... and obviously I'm talking about, you know, like the type of party that you have in like college or high school or something like that. But even, I mean, I don't know. Do adults have parties like that? I'm too poor to actually be invited to any of those parties. But if they did, or clubs.
The only thing that I know is a while back there was someone in our church who came to me who couldn't drink because one drink would throw that person over the edge. But because she saw so many people drinking, she thought it was okay. And so it all started, and it was a mess.
It was okay for her to do it, you mean?
Because she saw everybody else, not everybody, but those whom she regarded as who would lead her doing it.
Yeah.
So she figured it was okay for her to do it.
Well, I think that fits like I think that fits last week's lesson, or last couple weeks ago, whenever we talked about it. That fits that scenario well, that pressuring of other people and they end up sinning because of what we're doing. This is more participating in things that would, that in the mind of the unbeliever is sin, but obviously they don't care about sin, so they're indulging in it. And so you're participating now in it with them. Even though you may not be, again, you're not worshiping the demon yourself, right? You're not trying to, at least. But you're eating the meat that's associated with the worship of the demon. Yeah, Jesse?
I'm not convinced of this. It's something I wonder about. There are different opportunities for in our culture to go to a place with a lot of other people.
Yeah.
And a lot of times in these venues, you know, there's a lot of, I don't know, an NFL football game, right? You know, thousands of people, you know, giving a lot of attention to one particular thing. It's, you know, I mean, you throw it in and being on a Sunday and maybe worship points and whatever. The halftime is just like a demon. Those are side points. The point is that there's opportunities where to be a part of this much larger group of people who are all centered on one thing. And it almost, like, we've all kind of heard or know from experience that there can, like a crowd can have a mind of its own. Like a different spirit can come upon a crowd and you can do things in a crowd, or like a concert, or you just pick your thing, right? There's certain things that happen in a large crowd of people that you would never do like in a smaller crowd of people.
Yeah.
Or if you were alone.
The madness of crowds.
Right.
Yeah.
And I sometimes I wonder if there's venues like that in our society where, because of our materialism, we can't see it, but there is a lot of attention and worship, almost of a whole lot of people on a particular thing or a particular person or particular event, and then the individuals in the crowd get swept up into this.
Yeah.
It's kind of like we were talking about. You can't help but doing this, right? not that there's anything necessarily wrong with cheering for a sports team, but all of a sudden you're shouting, cursing to their team or whatever. You're doing things that you would never do in the normal, and if you're governed normally, right? And I'm not saying that every crowd you don't ever be in a crowd, but I just wonder if there's something going on there.
I think that might be a different issue of whether there's a danger in just being among secular crowds themselves or whatever. I think there's a risk there that we have to take in order to preach the gospel, and so I think you see that in the New Testament. But I do think that when there's a specific crowd that's there for a reason that is associated with something that is immoral, that's where the problem comes in. So, let's say what is the name of that big thing? It's like the Daisy Parade, not the Daisy.
Electric Daisy Carnival.
Yeah, so it's all about basically drugs and women scantily clothed and just all sorts of stuff or whatever. I know a lot of Christians who go to that.
Yeah, that's definitely not a Christian.
And in no way. Like that to me would be the equivalent of you walking into a temple and eating meat and being like, well, I'm strong. I don't take the drugs or whatever, even though you're probably, taking it in by just being there because it's in the air so much. And well, I'm just, I'm strong. I'm not going to be affected by the girls in their outfits or whatever. Or if you're a girl, I'm not going to be affected by all the guys hitting on the girls or whatever. And again, it's just, no, I think you're actually in sin by even going. Do I need a Bible verse that says, thou shalt not go to EDC?
Right.
No, I just need this to tell me, no, it's a crowd where you should, that's all associated with sinful things. So don't go to it.
Well, and it's specifically marketed that way too. Sorry.
Yeah, literally is. I mean,
Marketed for ravers and
Right.
druggies and
right. I mean, that's what it's for.
Subtle, okay, something like I was thinking about like the theater. I'd say 9 out of 10 shows that I've seen, I've walked out of.
Yeah.
Yes, but now, of course, in my early saving, time, but now, of course, you look at it and you see what the story, the play is about before you go. Theater, movies, stand-up comedy, all those sorts of things. They're going to be filled with all kinds of things. I know a play that was on Broadway that was a huge, huge hit. And it started off literally the first 10 minutes they're naked on stage.
Yeah.
And, and everyone was raving. I couldn't do that myself, but wow, it was incredible. Like they were excusing themselves. Now you're a Christian, you go to something like that, because no, you just can't.
And the big emphasis of Paul here is basically like, it's actually not even on us. It's true that we'll be corrupt, we're doing something wicked, and he's warning, hey, Christians, God will not be pleased with that. However, the big emphasis is that, what are you conveying to the people that you're supposed to be saving? You are a kingdom of priests to the world. You are to be holy as God is holy. And what are you conveying to the people if you're just going with them to that movie or to that play and you're just sitting and watching it now? Like I was looking so forward to seeing the Batman movie or whatever. And then someone told me that like it uses the Lord's name in vain like 30 times or something. And I was like, I'm not going to watch it then.
Now this Oppenheimer movie, don't go see
Right.
it.
I've heard Christians, Oppenheimer, and it has like a sex scene, right?
Massive, I hear. And I'm like, I read.
So it's stuff like that to where, look, now your unbelieving friends know it. They know what Christianity teaches about those things. Now you go in and you tell them, oh yeah, I just saw this movie, so great, da 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 da, and they know there's a major sex scene. It's like, what do they think? No, Christians participate in that sort of thing. So now that even if they are saved, they're going to think, well, the guy who saved me, I mean, he participated in it, so it's probably fine. And now you've got him to sin, which goes back to what we talked about a couple weeks ago. Now you're actually tempting people to sin, and you have become the stumbling blocks that Christ says, woe to you if you become.
It's interesting when you read the early church fathers, they almost universally condemn the theater.
Yeah. Yeah, they all do.
And it's not just because of the content.
Well, it mainly is, though.
Well, have other reasons why they condemn it too.
Yeah.
The whole, concept of putting on a mask and being someone that you're not. And on the one hand, I'm like, well, I don't have a problem with actors and actresses. On the other hand, man, look at the nominalism of our society and how we think that we can just change into a different sex and stuff. I'm like, well, maybe they have a point, But like they all saw it, right? They were like, do not do this.
Yeah. It's interesting that from Greco-Roman times probably to the early 20th century or whatever, all of that actually was, it was, people did not view actors the same way we do. They weren't like major celebrities. People thought they were mainly like prostitutes. Because it was like lowlifes do that. It's like carnival people, prostitution, that sort of thing. It's interesting that we made them into celebrities because ultimately it still is those kind of people. They largely are prostitutes, and all sorts of, just lower tier people, morally speaking. They're willing to look at the roles they're willing to do. And not everybody, obviously.
Expensive clothes.
Even if you have like a PG movie where you have an actor and an actress who are just sharing a kiss, most of these people are married.
Right.
And then they're committing adultery on screen.
Yeah.
For your amusement.
It's like, would you go up and French kiss some lady as a married person? I mean, obviously that wouldn't be okay. But I'm acting.
We say it's okay. Yeah, we say it's okay because you're acting.
Right. I don't know how we got off on that. It was kind of a rabbit trail, but. But look, the emphasis is, look, we're trying to save people, but you're trying to save people by bringing them to the holy community. You're not trying to say, hey, come out of Egypt with me so that you can be struck down in the wilderness with me. I'm going to go out in this wilderness on my way to the promised land, and I'm actually going to commit idolatry. I'm going to engage in sexual morality. I'm going to grumble against God and against his authorities. I'm going to complain about what he's provided. Come do that with me so that you can be killed too. Why would anybody want to leave Egypt if that was actually what you were inviting them to? But that is what you're doing when you participate in these things as believers. And so Paul's urging is say, hey, love people more than yourself. Love the believer more than yourself. Don't cause him to sin. And if you're trying to save the future believer, don't cause your future brother to sin either by the way that you behave today.
I'm thinking about a church that is not teaching scripture, and you're going there and you're involved in with them, and you get all in the crowd and you get all emotionally involved and all of that too. It's just,
That's partly what the Corinthians have the same issue, right? We're good with God because we have this spiritual stuff going on. We're super excited. We have these gifts going on, and Paul's trying to indicate or tell them, look, that has nothing to do with true spirituality. Those are things you can use to become spiritually mature, but it doesn't mean you are spiritually mature. I mean, there's so many things we could mention, like, you blow off church to do something else. What does that say to all the unbelievers around you? There's so many things that Christians do that I think they're guilty of this.
I think there's also the aspect of peer pressure, not just with friends, but with family, where if you're the odd person out saying no, I think that speaks volumes to the people around you. It's like, well, why is this person not wanting to do what I'm doing?
Yeah.
And sometimes it prompts questions and asks things, or it'll cause division.
Yeah.
But I think people forget that when you're with a group, they think that they're alone just because they don't want to seem weird or decline it, so they're going to go with it.
Yeah.
But not realizing that they actually have Christ with them instead, and the right thing to do would be to not do whatever that is. And that would actually be great in God's eyes, and potentially could open up the gospel.
Right. Yeah. Why are you different? Like that's the whole thing, right? And even 1 Peter, it's like you're waiting for someone to ask you a question, like what is the reason for this hope in you that you actually obey and under the pressure and all that. This may seem like a dumb example, but when Allison and I were younger, I was fully convinced, and to this day I still am, you should not lie to your kids that there's a Santa Claus. That is a tradition in our culture that Christians partake in, and I cannot tell you the amount of grief that we got from her family for it, from everybody for it. Now, later on, and it's because of that, we wouldn't let our kids sit with the Santa Claus in the mall. Now, later on, we told our kids it's like Mickey Mouse. And then we told them about, the real Saint Nick and all that. So it's fine if they sat with Santa Claus as long as they knew this is a fake character, it's not real, all that sort of thing. But before we did that, we didn't tell them that, and we didn't want to perpetuate the lie that there's a Santa Claus. Even in something small like that, like you're going to get grief because you're different, and you're saying, look, I'm not going to lie to my children. I think it's bad. I think it's harmful. I think it breeds mistrust with kids toward their parents in our culture.
Leads them to look to Santa Claus and be disappointed that they're not going to get gifts and that sort of thing. That's one of the major things I got convicted of, because I didn't get saved till after I had celebrated Christmas with Santa Claus twice with Joey. And I got saved then, and I was convicted, and there's no Santa Claus. There's no.
Yeah, a lot of Christians don't even think about it. I mean, I got into this debate in seminary with other seminarians, and I won the debate every time because I was like, okay, when is it okay to lie for no good reason? And you're lying to your kids. Oh, that's okay. Well, show me the Bible verse that actually supports that. Now, if you're trying to save your kid's life from someone who's trying to murder them, yeah, you're free to lie in that situation. But you're lying to your kids for no good reason because, well, it's fun.
But even if you're not, even if it's not just about the lying, and you're turning Santa into almost a godlike figure.
Well, right. And that's a whole other thing of the worship of the...
He's somehow omniscient, omnipresent. He's taking on attributes of God, and then you're conveying something theologically to your children, versus just like, hey, this is a fun game, and this isn't real.
Well, he's also, I mean, in reality, if you understand this language, because I'm not trying to be, hyperbolic with it, he actually functions as an antichrist figure because he takes away the attention from Christ at Christmas, and he takes it. And all the stuff that you should be telling your kids about Christ, you're actually telling them about Santa Claus.
He also pushes the whole brotherhood of man.
Right. Well, that's why he's a symbol for the Enlightenment and not Christianity.
Mentality.
Right.
And it's only one, at that time of year. It's not throughout your life.
Right.
That you live for Christ. It's just this time you got to be good right here.
Yeah. We should have a Santa that's like, he only gives to Christian kids who have faith in Jesus. And anyway, look, we go on and on about little things like that, but ultimately, we want to make sure that we're not. We want to have a Christian persona that's genuine, not just to our Christian friends, but to the world. We shouldn't be, well, I'm a Christian when I'm at church, but when I'm with my friends, then I'm like half a Christian and I'm compromised. We don't participate in the things that the world does. We're not going to participate in their lies because it's their fun lies. We're not going to participate in anything that they participate in that they consider fun, but is actually sin.
Yeah, and I think that in verse 31, it kind of hopefully pulls us off the rabbit trail a little bit. But so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God.
Yeah.
The idea is that we have a consistency in our walk.
Right.
There's nothing that we do in our life, whether what we watch, whether we speak, what we hear, nothing that is not connected to Christ in some way, shape, or form. And we have a tendency to compartmentalize different areas. That is not the case.
Yeah.
The whole of our being is given over to Christ. So even the smallest minutia, we might not get it, well, we won't get it all correct immediately. But we ought to be thinking in terms of how does this glorify or not glorify God?
Well, and what does glory mean? What is glory?
Beauty.
Not just beauty, but no. Well, the beauty part is right, but it's not just like God's beautiful if no one ever exists, right?
It's making God's beauty known.
Showing His beauty. So no matter what you do, show who God is to people. If you lie, are you showing who God is to people? If you partake in drinking in a carousal type party to where people are getting drunk, is that showing God's beauty to people? If you partake in sexual immorality, idolatry, grumbling, complaining, that's not showing God's beauty to people. So this is why, this is the catch-all statement. No matter what you do, whether you eat, whether you drink, anything you do, regardless, do it all to show people who God is, show his beauty to people. Let's go ahead and end in prayer. Man, you want to pray for us?
Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, Lord, we're so grateful for this evening to be together, to be with you, Lord, to hear your word. Thank you for allowing us to go through this chapter, Lord. It's crucial for us to remind ourselves, Lord, that we need to walk away from these sins. And we also need the strength to recognize these sins that maybe we haven't seen in ourselves. Allow us to be strong for each other, to encourage one another, Lord, as well, especially when we see others that are struggling. Allow us to have the strength to tell somebody, to let them know that it's not what they should be doing, and that's not Christ. Allow us to go out in this world, to be salt and light, to be good examples of Christ to those around, and to share the gospel. We thank you for this opportunity. We love you. Thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, guys.